Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the latest edition of the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. I am the sports editor here at the Herald Democrat, Jason Della Rosa, and we are about to enter Week 3 of the high school football season. Even though it's Week 3, we do have non-district and district action. There is one district game, and we will start with that because these are the games that count towards who makes the playoffs. And the one team that is kicking off their district schedule this week is the Denison Yellow Jackets. They will be taking on Frisco Lebanon Trail, and that game is at Toyota Stadium in Frisco on Friday night. It's District 7 5A Division 2. Both of these teams missed the playoffs last year. Denison missed on a tiebreaker, and Lebanon Trail went 1-9 in their first season as a varsity program last year. This year, Denison again enters 1-1. Lebanon Trail is 2-0, so they've already improved over last year's season, and they're going to look to take a big step in district play, getting their first district win. Last year, this game was not close. It was 41-0 Denison at halftime, and it ended up 41-14 after the Blazers scored twice in the fourth quarter. So some work to be done there for Frisco Lebanon Trail. Denison is going to try to overcome some injury issues on the offensive side of the ball. Sophomore running back Jadarian Price was injured in the season opener, did not play almost all of the second half against Sherman, and he did not dress in last week's loss, 53-34 to Burleson Centennial. He is again a game-time decision. He's going to dress, and we will see if he actually gets on the field or if Denison needs him. Seeing how the game goes may indicate his status. The bigger injury news that was unknown at this time last week was at the quarterback spot, and that's because Zaylin Wimbish was injured in the fourth quarter against Centennial last Friday. He has an injured shoulder, and he will be out 4 to 6 weeks. So that is a big blow to the Denison offense, especially if Price remains out, because Wimbish has led the team in rushing the first 2 games of the season. Last week, he ran for a touchdown and had 112 yards rushing, and he also threw for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns as well in the losing effort. So he's been a key piece taking over behind center this year as a senior. Caleb Hevner, who's a sophomore, is going to step in as the starting quarterback. He played the fourth quarter last week and completed 6 of 10 passes for 79 yards and a 38-yard touchdown pass to Keegan Pruitt. So he got some experience under his belt, so we'll see how he handles this whole week of being the starter in practice and getting the start in a game that will have some potential playoff implications if Lebanon Trail is as improved as they look to be. Every other game this week is non-district. Those teams still have at least one more week before we get into district play. And the Sherman Bearcats will be playing on Thursday night. So if you're listening to this early enough on Thursday, you might catch this before the game kicks off at 7 o'clock at the Star in Frisco as Sherman plays Frisco Liberty. Sherman is coming off a 28-17 win over Fort Worth Brewer, and Liberty is coming off a 42-14 loss to Carrollton Creekview, and that dropped Liberty to 0-2, while Sherman improved to 1-1. Sherman has not lost to Liberty in the previous 5 meetings. Last year, Sherman won 19-0 in a home game. That was their first shutout in 7 years. And Liberty went 0-10 last season. So this is not a team that has had a lot of success. They've lost 13 straight dating back to 2017, and they've had some trouble getting things going so far this year as well. This is a good chance for Sherman to get back-to-back victories and be in a good spot with one more game before they open district play in 2 weeks. Tate Bethel at quarterback has shown to be extremely accurate so far in his first 2 starts behind center, and last week the big plays came from Benji Amayabu. He ran for a touchdown, he caught a touchdown, and he returned a blocked field goal 68 yards for a touchdown. So that accounted for almost all the scoring last week for the Bearcats, and Mike Brown broke out with a big game. The senior running back had 22 carries for 154 yards as Sherman was able to salt that game away. They were up 28-3 going to the fourth quarter, and Brewer scored twice there, so the lead was really not in doubt for the whole game as Sherman built that early lead and was able to hold on to it. The next game will be Gunner at Whitesboro. This is a big matchup to watch for because the Gunner Tigers are coming off a loss, and that has been extremely rare for Gunner in the regular season. Pottsboro beat them 27-14 last week in a big showdown, and that was the first loss in 36 games in the regular season for Gunner. So you have an entire group of varsity players who do not know what it's like to turn around and play the next week after a loss. All of their previous 2 losses in the last 3 seasons had been in the playoffs, so that ended their season. That was it. Go on to other sports, get ready for the off season. This is the first time since 2015 that Gunner has had to play the week after they had a loss, and they're going to want to get back on track. The offense has been kind of scuffling for them. They scored 22 points in their first game, a win over Dangerfield that they won by a point, and Pottsboro held them to just 14 points last week. Both of those scores came in the third quarter on touchdown runs by Clayton Reed and Mitchell Brewer. So Gunner's going to try to bounce back. Whitesboro is also trying to bounce back. They're sitting at 1-1 after they lost 21-7 against Aubrey, and that was a game where the score was tied in the third quarter, and Aubrey was able to score a couple touchdowns late, and that proved to be the difference in that matchup. The only touchdown scored by Whitesboro was by quarterback Jake Hermes. He split some time with Cade Acker, who actually led the team in rushing with 18 carries for 65 yards. But it was not as good an offensive performance as they had in their first game. The defense has been good in both games. They've only allowed 4 touchdowns on the season, but that's another offense that's going to try to look to get things going. It's going to be a tall task because you have a Gunner team that is looking to get back on track. And Whitesboro has not beaten Gunner since 1950, so that's another thing going against them. Gunner has won 5 straight since the series restarted back in 2014. They didn't play from 1950 to 2014, so the last time Gunner won, or the last time Gunner lost was in before the season took a hiatus and then came back. They've been able to win the last 5, so that will be an interesting one. The next one between 2 local teams, Howe is going to visit Bells. Howe is coming off a 39-14 win against SNS to move to 1-1, and Bells lost another close one. They lost 26-21 against Wolf City, and they're sitting at 0-2, and that's after they lost by 8 points in the opener against Honeygrove. So they could easily be 2-0 if a couple possessions went their way instead of the opponents. This matchup has been Howe dominated. Howe's won 5 of the last 6, but they've all been not close. All 5 of those victories have been by at least 2 touchdowns. So Bells is going to try to change that narrative. Howe was able to get things going last week in the victory against SNS after falling to Ponder in the season opener. Jalen Thornton had a big game for the Bulldogs. He caught a pair of touchdown passes, including a 50-yarder, and he also led the team with 15 carries for 72 yards. And Austin Haley threw 3 touchdown passes. He also threw 3 interceptions, so there was some good and bad in there. And he did have to leave the game with an injury in the fourth quarter. And Leighton Elvington came on and finished off some scoring with a 32-yard touchdown pass to Jordan Jones. The defense chipped in. Hunter Brusso returned an interception, 42 yards for a score, and then Caden Harmon, who caught the last touchdown pass from Haley, also ran in a score. So it was a big game offensively for Howe, and Elvington also had 3 interceptions on defense as they were able to hold SNS down. Bells, that running attack is still the main way with the slot T for the Panthers, and it was a close game going basically all the way, just like the previous week against Honeygrove. Wrangler Priest ran for 2 touchdowns, and he had 10 carries for 94 yards. Bo Baker chipped in 10 carries for 48 yards, and it was 14-12. Bells leading going to the fourth quarter, but Dylan Wilson led Wolf City. He had 2 touchdowns after Bells had taken a 21-12 lead and that was the difference. Wolf City rallied to send the Bells to 0-2, so they're going to try to get back into the win column. The next game on the list is Pottsboro at Munster, and like we mentioned, Pottsboro is coming off that big win over Gunner, 27-14. Those teams have played the last 4 years as the second game of the season. Pottsboro had lost all of them. The last 2 years they had been shut out, hadn't really come close to beating the Tigers, and Braden Plyler led the way in this one. He threw for 251 yards and 2 touchdowns, and that was on 15 of 17 passing. So it was very efficient. One of those incompletions was an interception, so he only had the 2 incompletions. One was a miss and one was an interception. He also ran 23 times for 62 yards. Cy Shope, the running back, had 17 carries for 65 yards, had a 63-yard screen pass touchdown, and also ran one in. And Plyler also had a rushing touchdown. And Titus Lyons led the receiving corps with a big game. He had 8 catches for 153 yards and a score in the fourth quarter that kind of salted things away after Gunner had gotten to within 20-14 in the third quarter. That was the one early in the fourth, stretched the lead out a little bit, and the Pottsboro defense was able to do the rest there. Munster is also 2-0. They had a close game last week. They were able to win over rival Lindsay, 24-22. The game last season between Munster and Pottsboro was a close one. Munster won that one 39-34 in a shootout, and Munster's won 3 of the 4 meetings. So Pottsboro's going to try to get back at Munster. Munster's been very good over the last about half decade or so. They've won at least 10 games each of the past 6 seasons, and they're ranked 9th in Class 2A Division II this week coming into the matchup. So Lane Trubenbach is the director of the offense at quarterback. He kind of makes things go. He's a good dual threat quarterback, and Munster's feeling really good coming off a rivalry win last week. So that'll be interesting to see as Pottsboro goes on the road once again after winning at Gunner last week. So that'll be a nice follow-up test for the Cardinals. Van Alstyne hosts Anna. Both of these teams are 1-1. Anna's coming off a 46-26 win against Eastern Hills, while Van Alstyne is trying to bounce back. They lost 52-13 against Sunnyvale. This was another close matchup last year. It was 30-29, and Anna came away with the win after a field goal in the final 2:27 gave them the lead, and Van Alstyne had a chance to go back in front. They had a game-winning kick, a field goal attempt from 45 yards out, but that came up short. Obviously, that's not a gimme at any level, and Van Alstyne ended up losing by a point. Anna's won the last 3 meetings, which is significant because Van Alstyne has an overall series lead of 33-10 in terms of the one-loss record. So while the Panthers have dominated overall, Anna's found a way to get it done the last 3 years. In the loss to Sunnyvale, the offense for the Panthers did not do very well. They only had 95 yards rushing and 92 yards passing. So after opening with a victory to their season and looking pretty good in doing so, Sunnyvale, who is 2-0 and is a ranked team in 4A, that's something that Van Alstyne is going to look to bounce back from. They were down 31-10 at halftime, and they never really got into the mix at all in that one. Another local matchup at the lower levels, Collinsville is going to be at SNS. We mentioned SNS before because of the 39-14 loss to Howe. That's a game where Jake Reynolds had a 21-yard pass to Devin Jackson in the first quarter, and the Rams were only down 13-7 at halftime. And it was actually in the middle of the third quarter they were only down 22-7, and then Howe kind of used a late surge in the fourth to pull away. Joey Baggs had a 4-yard touchdown run for the other score for SNS. Colby McSpadden finished with 66 yards on 13 carries to lead the Rams in that one. So it was competitive, and I think the big thing with SNS is they're still trying to learn how to get better and win under their new head coach. I said if you're playing games that are closer, you can see kind of sort of the the incremental progress, and I think that's the biggest thing as SNS is going to try to maybe surprise some people when they get into district play. Collinsville was able to bounce back after a 2-point loss in their opener. They were able to rally against Quinlan Bowles last week, 21-12. This was a game where Bowles was up 6-0 at halftime, and the Pirates were down 12-7 going to the fourth quarter, and they were able to come up with an interception return for a touchdown by Nathan Bocanegra. That was the difference. He returning that first score, and the offense was led by Corey Shepard, who ran 21 times for 200 yards and a touchdown. Luis Hernandez, quarterback, added another touchdown on the ground, and that allowed Collinsville to get their first win of the season and their first win under new head coach Garrett Patterson, who's a Collinsville alum. So that was good for them. Last year, Collinsville won this matchup 32-6, and that was the first win in 6 tries in the series for the Pirates. So they're going to try to keep going in that direction. And SNS is still trying to break what is now a 13-game losing streak dating back to the 2017 season. So should be an interesting game between two teams with two new coaches, and we'll see how that comes out this week. The next game is a game that did not get played last year, so this will be an interesting matchup to watch. Whitewright visits Como-Picton. Whitewright is coming off a 48-20 loss against Honeygrove, while Como-Picton is also coming off a loss. They were beaten by Detroit 34-16. Now, this game was scheduled for last year, and storms, which seemed to happen on a weekly basis on every Friday last year, canceled this game that was supposed to be at Whitewright, so we don't have any comparison to match these teams up against each other. The only other meeting between the schools was in 2002. It was a playoff game, and Whitewright won that one 13-12 to advance. But since there's no comparison for last year, it's going to be kind of hard to see how this one might shake out. Como-Picton is coming in on a 6-game losing streak that dates back to last year, so that is something to look for. And Whitewright has a chance to match its win total from last season with its next victory after it opened the season with a win against Clarksville. So there's a chance for that to happen. In the loss to Honeygrove last week, again, it was a game after a quarter. Whitewright was only down by a point, and even at halftime it was 22-7, but they were unable to stop Honeygrove's rushing attack. Trell Pruitt led Honeygrove, and he had 24 carries for 233 yards and 5 of the touchdowns. So as a team, Honeygrove ran for 418 yards. So if that's one area where you probably want to watch to see if Como-Picton's able to move the ball on the ground against Whitewright or not. Marshall Mangrum, the quarterback for Whitewright, had a good game rushing. He ran 12 times for 118 yards and a touchdown. The passing, he threw for 139 yards and 2 scores. However, the percentage was not very good. He only completed 8 of 22 passes with an interception. And Ryan Godby and Aaron Pitt had the touchdown catches for the Tigers. But it wasn't an efficient passing attack, but there were some big chunk plays in there to move the ball a little bit. So it's going to be interesting to see how Whitewright bounces back this week. The next game on the list is Maud at Tom Bean. The winner of this will be getting their first win of the season. Tom Bean is 0-2 after they lost 26-6 to Prairieland last week. And Maud did not play. They had their bye extremely early, and that's really weird, but that's the way they set up their schedule. So they're only 0-1. And last year was the first meeting between the schools. Tom Bean came away with a 21-7 victory. So Tom Bean will look to continue that success against Maud. The Tomcats are trying to avoid an 0-3 start for the third time in 4 seasons. And Maud is trying to figure things out. They opened with a 26-6 loss to Ore City under their new head coach, Josh Turner. So I don't even know if you're the Tomcats, if you can compare last year to this year, because not only are you dealing with the graduation factor of probably several starters, but you have a whole new coaching staff and maybe a philosophy change. So that's going to be interesting to watch if Tom Bean's able to come away with a victory like they did last year. The offense has struggled for Tom Bean so far. In 2 games, they've only scored 2 touchdowns. They had one in their opening loss, 7-6 loss against Tioga, and then last week against Prairieland, the only score was a touchdown run by Caleb Graham in the fourth quarter to help them avoid the shutout. So Tom Bean's looking to get things going offensively. The defense has actually been pretty good. You only give up 33 points through 2 games. If the offense can give a little more, then I think they'll be in a good spot. The last game on the schedule this week is Tioga at Munster Sacred Heart. Tioga is coming off a 42-13 loss to Blue Ridge, while Sacred Heart, and they're 1-1. That's what Tioga is after they beat Tom Bean. And Sacred Heart is sitting at 2-0. They're coming off a 36-12 win over Era, and that followed their 8-6 win against Collinsville in the season opener. So last year's matchup, Sacred Heart won 30-6, and they're going to look to extend that streak against the Bulldogs. Sacred Heart's only allowed 3 touchdowns in 2 games, so it'll be interesting to see if Tioga can get things going offensively. They were better than they were from game 1 to game 2, and that's a good sign. Caleb Scott had a big game. The senior running back for Tioga had 25 carries for 171 yards and a touchdown last week, and Ryan Montgomery scored for the second straight week on the ground as a compliment to Scott in the backfield. So that's a positive sign as they show the improvement that you want to see from week 1 to week 2. The question is going to be, can they keep that going again this week? Turnovers have been the biggest thing for Tioga to clean up on offense. They've had a bunch of them. They had a bunch against Tom Bean. They had more. They had some more last week against Blue Ridge. So that'll be the biggest thing to watch for there, and see if they can get a victory that would give them more wins than they had all of last season when they finished 1-10 after a playoff loss. So the next win for Tioga will give them more wins than they had last year as well. So that's a look at week 3 of the high school football season. We'll see how some teams do. We'll see how things shake out as we get ready and closer for district play. And in the case of Denison, see if they can get off to a good start in their district schedule. And I hope you enjoyed the matchups, the info, and we hope you tune in, and we hope you keep tuning in.